Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. Also welcome to the next of my paint along demos in soft pastel, where you can work right from the beginning to the end of a little portrait and hopefully learn lots in the process. So I've produced quite a few of these in this series covering different subject matters, but my patrons on Patreon have been asking for a cat demo. So that's what I'm going to work on today. I hope that you will work along with me. I will chat as I work, try to explain the things that I'm doing and why I'm doing them. And if you do enjoy this here on YouTube, do remember to hit the subscribe button and show me some support. I'll also add some links in the description below to my Patreon channel, where you can access my full catalogue of tutorials and lots more. Enjoy the tutorial. So let's give you some information so that you can work along with me. I'm working on Pastelmat paper. It's the sienna colour, and I've cut this down to 8 by 10 inches, so really quite small, but I'm trying to squeeze a lot of painting time into a couple of hours, 2 or 3 hours I'm aiming for. So I'm keeping mine small so that I have some chance of finishing it. Do feel free to make yours bigger if you want to add more detail and spend longer on it. The photo that we'll be working from is of my big beautiful rescue cat, Mocha, and I will add that photograph on screen here now so that you can use this to sketch from. You can pause the video here and either sketch or trace from this. If you are a member on my Patreon channel, you'll get access to this photo reference as a download, along with a gridded version, a line version, and lots more to help you get started. And I've already got some colours laid out here. What I've actually done is taken my Unison animal set and I've laid them all out here. I didn't have a complete set, so I just went through my collection and chose out the colours. So I'm going to try and limit myself to just my animal set. I may pick up a colour or two before the end of the painting, but this colour list that I show you here now is actually the full colour list that I used for the whole painting. So if you have something close to this palette, you will be able to work along. Also, you can see here that I've got a selection of some pastel pencils as well. Those are definitely going to come in useful. And you can see here that I've got my line drawing transferred onto the Pastelmat, ready to go. I've shown this part of my process in lots of my other videos, so if you're struggling with that, I will add some links in the description below. But let's get started. So the first thing that I'm going to start to do is block in some background. And often my pieces have really complicated backgrounds, so for a change today, I thought we'd go really simple. But still, it's the first thing that I usually tackle on my paintings. Get the background in. Don't be too worried about going over the edges of the animal, as I really want the background to sit behind, especially all of these soft fuzzy edges. So I've just picked up one of the nice warm additional colours from the set, and I'm going to give it a light layer of that all over. So I don't want my background to be plain white. I'm going to try and add a little bit of interest to the background. There are some simple tricks that you can do even when you're creating a background that's very plain. Just some things that you can do with colour and light that will really help your main subject pop. So we'll probably spend 5 to 10 minutes initially just getting a very simple plain background before starting on the cat. So a very thin layer of pastel, you'll find, doesn't completely cover the grain of the paper, so you can still see that it's patchy, and that's absolutely fine. That's what I want. I don't want to fill the paper with the first layer. I just want this base layer down so that my next colours on top will mix nicely. So I'm looking at the direction of lighting in the photograph, and the light is really coming from this side of the cat. So we're going to have the shadow side of the cat over here and the sunlit side over here. So I want to make this side of the background slightly darker than this side. I'd like over here to be really bright, where that light is coming from, as if it's heading over here. And in turn that will help our shadow side of the cat stand out nicely over here. And then on the other side, hopefully any highlighted areas on the cat will stand out nicely over there. So for over this side of the cat's face where I want it to be lighter, I'm now picking up my grey 27. One of my favourite lighter tints. It's got a nice yellow tint to it. It's about as close as you can get to white with just a lovely tint of yellow. So I often use this as my white, just a bit warmer, a bit less stark or harsh than pure white. And I'm going to pick up a little bit of quite a lilac coloured additional, also from the set. And a bit more cool over here. I'm also trying to think about the colours that I might use in Malka himself. And I know that I'll use some of this grey 27 in the highlights, especially on this side of his face. And I know that I'm going to bring in blues and lilacs on the shadow side of his face. So I would like to reflect that a little bit in my background colour choice. It's always a good idea if you're trying to choose a plain background colour that you do think about some of the colours you might use within the painting, therefore helping your overall painting have a bit more colour harmony. So I just want to try and build up a little bit of smooth gradation of colour coming over to this side of the cat, and just judging gradually how bright I really want to take it. I think I do want to go a bit lighter than this all over, not so much lilac or blue. So I just continue using the bigger pastels on their sides, adding a bit more pigment where I want it. Sometimes I'm not leaning very heavily. Like here, I'm really just letting the paper, or letting the pastel touch the paper a bit. And then over here where maybe I want a bit more light pigment on the paper, I lean a little bit heavier. So just play about with the pressure that you apply to your pastels. And of course that will be different for everyone, as we all work with slightly different styles. But another great reason to use pastels on their sides like this sometimes is just for all these fantastic sharp edges that you get after doing that. I know that I could use this big stick to get a very precise little dot of pigment somewhere if I needed to later on. So just continuing to blend. I really want this background to be quite smooth. Just a nice soft light gradient behind the cat, and hopefully all the lovely detail in him will really stand out against this. And it makes a pleasant change actually to work on a nice quick plain background, because so many of my pieces have very complicated backgrounds. So it does make a nice change to be done with the background within the first 10 minutes. How unusual. So yeah, just continuing to add a little bit of pigment onto the paper very lightly, deciding how much lilac I really want on this side of the cat. Maybe lighten it just a little bit more. So using the grey 27, no white, just keeping it nice and warm. But you can see how quickly and easily you can build up this type of background with soft pastel. It's the perfect medium for blending and mixing colors like this, creating lovely soft gradients. So that's pretty good. And maybe just add a little bit of the cool color down at the bottom here. You can go back over backgrounds like this and add in more color, more texture if you like, but that's pretty much how to get a nice basic simple gradient. So now we're on to the cat's face itself. And the first step of a lot of my paintings might start with this little Faber Castell stick. This is half of one of the sticks, and I will add a link to these in the description below, as I find that they're a good bit harder than the regular soft pastels, so I can keep a little bit of control with this in my lower layers. It's also a very good dark black, so I do a lot of my initial tonal work with this, and it also means that I don't fill the paper too much at this early stage. Lots of space left on the tooth of the paper for my next layers of soft pastel. So the first part of this process is going to be me trying to pick out some of the darkest contrasted areas on the cat. Sometimes even changing your photo reference into grayscale to have alongside you while you're painting can be very, very useful for this part of the process, because it's in this part that I really want to lay down all of the darkness that is going to help my contrast later on. So just using the black to quickly darken down certain areas, and many of these areas I will come back into with colour on top. But today, especially when I have a time constraint, I'm going to try and progress this as quickly as possible. There's so much work on a cat's face, so I'm really not expecting to get this 100% detailed like I normally would if I took ages on a commission piece. But I'm going to try my best to speed this along today, as I like to show you in these demos that you don't have to take hours and hours. You can produce something that's really realistic and quite detailed within just 3 or 4 hours with soft pastel. So that's what I'm aiming for. Hopefully I will get a good enough result within maybe 3 hours or so, but we'll see. Cats are so much more difficult, I think, than dogs. Certain breeds of dog have a similar type of fur to cats, but cat's fur really is tricky. There's so many layers to it, it's just so thick. And this cat in particular, that lovely tiger stripe pattern, he really is a beauty, so I'm going to enjoy staring at this lovely face for the next while. So on all of my first layers, I'm already thinking about the direction of the fur and its texture. I don't have to be too neat at this stage, but I'm certainly thinking about where some of those darker patches lie on his face. Getting those blocked in at this early stage is useful. And if you can hear a bit of tip-tapping on the tiles and a bit of sniffing, that's one of my dogs. That's Brocky in. Maybe she's jealous that I'm painting the cat this time and not her. And of course, if you haven't seen it, I have a little paint along demo of my dachshund Brocky here on YouTube as well, so if you fancy painting along with me on a dog, you will find that here on my YouTube channel. So just really going around looking for all the areas where I'm going to need that underlying darkness later on. To get the density and the thickness of an animal's fur, it's really key to get the contrast. Usually the problem is that people don't go dark enough in certain areas. So my early part of the painting is usually all about finding those darkest areas, getting them blocked in, and then I can come back in and cover over lots of the stark black with other colours, but I like to get that darkness down first and then build my other lighter layers around that. So certain areas I'm leaning a bit more heavily with the Faber Castell stick. Certain areas where I can see that it's going to need quite a lot of darkness, that it's maybe really jet black in there. Then other areas I'm being a little bit more sketchy with the stick. You can see that I'm not being too fussy or precise with the marks at this stage. Just trying to block in and start to get a rough idea of the texture and the pattern that I'm seeing. And the main difficulty with cat's fur is just how many small marks you've got to make it look realistically thick and dense, because when you start to zoom in on a cat's face, the detail just seems to go on forever. It's crazy. They've got such beautiful features, but their fur, especially when you get a cat with really thick fur like this, so yeah, I usually take quite a long time on cat portraits, because not only do they have the most difficult type of fur, I also think they've got the most difficult eyes, because they're so big and there's so much expression in a cat's eyes. Even when photographing Malka for this, I got so many different photographs of him where his eyes had a very different character in them. In some he looked like a bit of a psycho, in others he looked cute, in others he looked like a proper predator. You know, cats really change their expression from second to second, so it can make a big difference when you're painting from a photo reference, that the photo actually does describe the character of the cat that you want to portray. So I chose out some of my favourite shots of him, and I let the guys on my Patreon channel vote for which one they would like to see. And this one of Malka is the one that they chose. So it's front facing, gives me a little bit of a challenge because we've got both eyes in full view. No sneaking around with a 3/4 view where I can do 1.5 eyes. No, we've got both eyes, and they're such beautiful eyes, so I really want to try and capture those as best I can. And of course I will be making use of some pastel pencils in this portrait. You'll see that I lay down most of my colours with the soft pastels, but it will come to a point where it's useful to get those little points of the pencils and really start tweaking some of the smaller hairs into place. But you can see that just with the black stick you can do a lot to start to describe the texture and the flow and the structure before even bringing in any colour. So yeah, this is more like a little like a tonal sketch, just adding the tonal work before coming in with the colour. And of course, working on Pastelmat, a lot of my work is on velour paper, but recently I've been really enjoying experimenting more with Pastelmat. It's not my first cat portrait on Pastelmat, but I'm well aware that I tend to take longer when I'm working on Pastelmat than on velour, so we really will see how this goes today. It could be an 8-hour long demo, who knows. But I know that if I take time in this first section where I'm doing a lot of the tonal work here, starting to describe some of the little areas of texture already, I know that by doing this at the start really does help me speed on through the portrait later on when it comes to the rest of the colours. Because at this stage I'm really plotting in each separate little section on his face as well, which I've already done to a certain extent in the sketching process, really examined each section of his face. But now it's really like I'm breaking it all up into the segments with this first layer. So you can just see the way this hair flows around the top of the eye, sort of creates an eyebrow area on him. So each little bit of structure is so important to some part of the cat's face, some of his features. Everything's linked. It's just like a big jigsaw puzzle trying to get it all to join up. So really paying attention to the overall flow of the fur, even at this early stage, because you can see already how much easier it's going to be for me to come in with the colours and start dotting some of that in between those marks. So it's extra dark on this side of the cat's face. We really do have a lot of shadow over here, all the way around. And we're going to see that reflected in the colours that I choose for each side of the face. But the only thing that I'm really concerned with at this stage is the black. And there's a lot of this cat that I can do before even starting to come in with any colour. Just building up the texture. Of course, I'm not just going to cover the whole thing in black, just looking for those darkest areas. But even, for example, between these darkest stripes that run up his forehead, in the little spaces in between, you've got a lot of texture in here. You can see black marks through there too. So basically anywhere that I can see black marks through the rest of the colours, I want to add that darkness in first. So I'm just going to dot away here. This part will take a little while, but it's worth the effort because I'm also plotting out all of his markings. Just doing a lot of the groundwork at this stage. So of course any of the places that I can see that are really dark, I can afford to lean there a little bit heavier. So yeah, this is quite a challenge to take on for a shorter type of demo like this. Really not sure how long it's going to take me, but I'm going to try and keep the speed up and try to not get bogged down in too much detail. But that's easier said than done when working on Pastelmat paper, I find. I have good intentions on this paper and then I just tend to get lost in a sea of detail. So I do think I'm a little bit slower on Pastelmat paper than on velour paper. And I do like the effects that I get on both. But I'm certainly not trying to get any slower because I already spend quite a lot of time on my pieces. So even at this early stage, I want to come back in with some black pastel pencil too. I don't want to lose the shape of the eyes too much. I've tried to sketch those out as accurately as possible. Each little line and direction is so important in capturing the expression. And I just want to be sure at this early stage that I don't lose any of these really important lines. But I will leave the detail in the eyes until a good bit later when I start to feel that the top of the head is coming together at least. And it doesn't really matter what order you do things in. If you want to work on the eyes at this stage, there's no reason why not to. I just like to have a little bit more of the form around the eyes built, using the colour to describe well, the shape of the eye sockets to begin with. So I tend to just leave them until a little bit later in the piece, but there's no reason, if you like working on them first, there's no reason why not to. But at this stage I just don't want to lose my outline of the eyes. And at this stage I've also got another chance just to reassess the outline, really looking closely at the photo reference, making sure I've got the sweep of these lines nicely. Of course I'll do more work on the overall shape of them later on. But I find it really helpful just to get those initial dark values in to get going. If you're more comfortable using a pastel pencil, even at this early stage for some of those in-between areas, you can also do that. I just like the Faber Castell stick because it's that extra bit dark. So I've been wanting to paint a cat as a demo for a while, I do have another cat tutorial, parts of it on my YouTube channel here, and then really in-depth tutorials on the fur of a British blue, one of those lovely big grey cats. And the other parts of that you'll find on my Patreon channel. But there are lots of parts of that project for free here on my YouTube channel as well. But hopefully this little project will give you all a chance to work along with me, or just simply watch something from beginning to end in real time. And so while I'm just working on with the black, this part will take me a little bit of time, but I'll tell you a little bit about Mocha the cat. About a month ago I moved house. You might notice that I have a new studio in my videos. The backdrop has changed, and I've been busy setting that up this past month. And I've moved out to the countryside, so I've got a bit more space to help out some animals in need. And Mocha lived on the street in the town where I used to live, and I knew him for a couple of years. He's one of the many street cats, but one of the luckier ones, a friendly guy who befriended many neighbours and got regular food and things like that. But just before moving house I saw him with a broken leg and half of his paw missing outside on the street. So after a long journey with Mocha, he has ended up at my house. He's had a couple of operations, firstly to try and save his leg, and more recently to amputate his leg, so he has transformed into a tripod. But he's adapted really well, and hopefully he will live a very happy cat life with us. So he does happen to have the most beautiful face. He's one of those big macho cats, a big boy with a big face, giant head. He's got really big jaws which he likes to playfully bite you with sometimes. But he's really a very, very pretty cat. So over on the right side of the face where the sun is coming from, you'll notice that there should be a bit less black used. There's a lot more brown in the same places where on the other side it's jet black. So I will add some black over here, but a lot of my darkest values on this side of the face will be more the dark browns. And if you haven't tried it before, or if you're just starting out with pastel, Pastelmat really is a good paper to learn on. It's smooth, so you're not fighting with a difficult texture. You can easily get a lot of detail on it. And it will hold lots of layers of pastel, so if you're just starting out it might seem strange to come in with such dark black to begin with, but you just have to trust that this paper holds lots of layers of pastel and that your lighter colours will easily go over the top of this. So one of the trickiest areas is on a cat's nose. You've got so many different directions of fur happening. And just remember to try and make the smallest marks you possibly can on the nose area. That's really where the fur is at its shortest. So just going back through, making sure I've got plenty of texture in between some areas. I will pick up the black later on. You'll see that I come back in and redarken areas and add to that. Ideally, you want many layers built up gradually to give the illusion of the thick fur. So don't expect to get it looking like really thick, luscious fur after only a couple of passes over with some pastel. Just take your time on it. Build things up gradually. So before starting to come in with any colour, I'm just going to go around some of the edges in a moment with some pastel pencil. Just darkening down the rest of this ear first. You can see how dark it needs to be just behind the lighter hairs. And you'll notice just a little smudge over my light background there was very easily sorted out. So with a brown pastel pencil, I'm just going to take this opportunity, while it doesn't matter if I lean on the cat's face, to start and soften some of the edges. Especially on this left side of the face, as it does help to have somewhere to anchor my hand. And you can just drag the pigment out and then very lightly smudge it out over the edges. This is why it really doesn't matter when you're doing your background if, for example, you come in over the edges of the cat. Ideally that's what you want, so that your background can be seen through all of the tiny little hairs around the edges. So just try not to lose the overall shape of his face in there. It's really only the outer edge that's a bit fluffy and soft. The shape of his face really isn't determined by much fur because his hair is quite short. He really does have this big, this large face with big cheeks that come out each side. So I don't want to make him look too fuzzy. He's a short-haired cat. And then you can soften those edges a little bit with either with a blender or just with your finger. Again, it's very easy on Pastelmat especially, just to keep the background nice and clean. So any of these little edges around the outer parts of the cat, especially towards the top, I tend to work from the top downwards, and this is the reason why, just so that I'm not leaning on finished parts of my painting. So just using the pastel pencil to shape down this ear. And also drag out some little hairs over the edges. So just make sure that you've got a nice sharp point on your pastel pencils for doing the little edges like this. I use Faber Castell pencils, but there are many good pastel pencil brands on the market. And just sticking with the pastel pencil for a few minutes just to get this important little edge, how it comes down this side of his face. You can see that it's much lighter over here, so I'm using this lighter brown pastel pencil just to plot in this shape of his face again. And you can see, because that overlaps my background, it means all those little tiny fine hairs will sit nicely over the top of it. So let's start coming in with some colour. First place I'm going to tackle is inside the ears. As I said earlier, work my way mostly down from the top of the piece, so it makes sense to start off with some ear colour. Picking up this lovely plummy purple colour from the animal set from Unison, and I included a few of these lovely fleshy purples and pinks in the top row of the set, specifically for things like insides of ears or noses, and just fleshy areas in general. And I do love using this colour. So you can see the difference between the colour inside this ear to this one over here. And I do want to add some of the deeper colour towards the top of the ear where it's in shadow. But then perhaps bringing in some lighter tones the further down the ear we go. So if you don't have exactly the same colours as me and you're trying to work along, I would say not to worry too much about having the exact same colours. Just try and focus on the tonal values you're looking for, because you can really substitute for a lot of different colours as long as you try and create the correct tonal values. And that's a really useful exercise anyway, to learn to substitute colours or to layer up a few colours in order to mix. So really don't worry if you don't have all of the same colours. So now when I start to bring some colour in, I can start to liven up some of the black areas that I've already added. And I'm still really just looking for the dark patches. Trying to wait until I have a few more layers of pastel on the paper before bringing in the lighter colours. If you don't spend enough time on these lower layers, your fur might end up looking quite flat. If you jump in with the highlight colours too soon, then you probably won't have built up that nice contrast. So it's my lighter colours where I really describe the flow of the fur and look for all of the little twists and flicks within the patterns. But even in these lower layers, I am trying to pay attention to it, making my marks short, trying to have them fan out and flow around in the right directions. And the ears are always quite a tricky area to work on because you want them to sit up so crisp in front of the rest of the animal and in front of the background, whatever your background might be. And of course it's quite difficult to keep the background behind the ears nice and clean, so just really take your time. And then also don't be afraid to come in with some background color and just reshape certain areas. So down this side of the ear being caught by the light, just delicately trying to apply a little line of pigment down this. And the same over on the other ear, just where the light's catching, bringing out this lovely rich brown earth. And also using that brown earth just to add a bit more warmth and glow to the inside of the ears. So just spend a little minute working on this outer edge of the far ear. So picking up some highlight colour pretty early on. But as I said at the start, I like to start with the ears and get those done so that I don't have to lean on any other parts of my work again. So just building up a bit more shadow in at the tip of the ear. And just while I have the black pastel pencil, just some of those little hairs that sprout from the very tip of the ear. So just using this lighter brown earth to start and pick out some of the highlighted sections on this side of the ear. Of course, this ear has been hit by more sunlight. But just using a little broken piece of pastel, searching for nice sharp edges and doing my best to aim the pastel where I need it. And that just takes a little bit of practice. You can see I don't get it perfect every time either, but it's quite easy to fix mistakes as you go. So again, the same on this tip of the ear, really quite dark in under that very top lip. So just always trying to make sure that I've got the darks dark enough before going too far with my mid-tones or even starting to bring in highlights. And because of the scale that I'm working on, I'm probably going to make use of a good bit of pastel pencil in this tutorial. Cats have such fine little hairs, but many of them to make up that overall thick fur. So I will be making use of those little sharp points on the pencils. especially like before, just around the edges here. So just working to keep those edges nice and clean. You can see that's easy enough to do if you have a small mistake. So like on the other ear, starting to pick out some of the colour around the rim of the ear, just a little bit of highlight colour. Of course on this side over in the shadows I'm using a much cooler colour, not the nice warm brown earth, but this lovely additional 4, which is a very light tint of lilac, quite similar to what we've used in the background. So that's the sort of colour I want to bring into the shadow tones on the cat's face. And you can see how strongly the pigment goes on to the paper, even on top of dark colours. And I don't have to worry too much about getting it in exactly the right place. I can come in afterwards with the points of the pencils and just shape that a little bit better. So that's how I'm usually using the pastel pencils when I pick them up. They're more as a tool to shape the pigment that I've already put down. So on this side, on the ear, the highlights really do come up much brighter. Using some grey 27 here, just to pick out this little ridge that's really catching the light. And I like working both ears together like this because, especially when there's side lighting, and both ears look quite different in tonal values. So it's good if you can compare them together as you go. So yet another nice colour from the top right of the animal set, A27. Another one that I would put in the flesh coloured range, but also just one of those really useful off grey kind of colours, but with a lot of warmth to it. A colour that I pick up all the time. So just working my way around the ear to the point that I have enough built up inside the ear that I can tackle all of those little fine hairs that come across it. So I don't want to rush and add those in too soon, because you really can't change much of what's behind those hairs once you have them in. Just going to start and add some of these finer hairs inside the ear. You can see I've just made a bit of a start, then realised that I had paused the camera and hadn't hit record again. Some of the joys of filming while trying to concentrate on a painting. So I'll just start in again, and I'm going to add some of these darker hairs using a blue. Just looking beyond the brightest hairs And you can see some hairs inside the ear really tucked away in the shadows. So I'll add some of those in first. Still trying to leave lots of dark gaps for my lighter hairs. And then I'm just using really nice sharp pastel pencils for this. They tend to work really well on the Pastelmat paper. You can cover pretty dark colours quite nicely with the pastel pencils. If you're trying to combine pastel pencils along with soft pastels, really depends a little bit on your style, but what I like to use is one of the slightly softer pastel pencils so that you can actually get a good amount of pigment onto the paper. So this is a light grey. I'm still not using white. There are a lot of hairs that aren't white, especially on this side of the face where we're in shadows. So just trying to look for the individual clumps of hair and where they're sprouting out from. And you really could spend a long time on just one ear, really trying to get it more accurate, get every little hair in place. You can keep going and going on Pastelmat and get lots of detail. But today I'm just going to try and speed some of this along, give you the basics. You feel free though to take your time on this. You can pause the video. It's never a race, always take your time. So just really looking where these hairs sprout from. And then trying to make the mark itself a bit quicker. So it's not unlike whiskers, these hairs. And there's a lot more of them inside the ears. So ears are always pretty tricky. So just look for the way all of those hairs join into the ear. I can even bring in a little bit of my warmer colour in here, dot some of that up the ear. So I've got to be careful on this side of the cat's face to not let all of my warm colours that I'm going to use over here dip down into the shadow area on the cat. But I just want to get a little bit of the texture coming up in front of the ear here. So I always find this direction to work much more difficult. So you'll always find that there's one ear that's easier than the other. So for example, when I'm on this side, it's much easier to make flicks that go, if you're right-handed, then they're going to the right. So it's always trickier on the other side. If you're left-handed, then maybe this is your difficult ear. Just starting with some of the little ones in shadow at the top of the ear. And also adding some background ones in before coming in with the brighter whites. But you can see the difference on this side because of how the sunlight's hitting over here. And they're still not entirely pure white though, so just really try to look for the colours. Always be suspicious of white things in paintings. They're seldom actually white. So I'm not being too fussy about this, not really taking my time too much here. Of course you can be a bit more careful with this. And just to highlight a few a little more brightly, I may need to take some soft pastel for this because pastel pencil does have its limitations. I've sharpened it nice and sharp, but it's also difficult to get a really strong white line unless you lean really hard, and then you run the risk of breaking the lead. So it's just about finding that balance, that sweet point at which you can lean and not break the lead. We might be okay without some soft pastel in here, but I really want to get some of these gleaming a lot whiter. And we'll just see if I can add a few bits of, I think I'm going to lose the definition by doing that. So I'm going to continue with the pastel pencil. So normally on the velour paper I'd be coming in with more soft pastel in these parts, and for me it's just about trying to find a balance now about when I need to use the pastel pencils, because I much prefer to be using the big sticks and getting all that lovely rich pigment onto the paper. But on Pastelmat, there's no denying that the pencils do really become useful. And I use them quite a lot on velour as well, but I certainly noticed that I picked them up a little bit more on the Pastelmat. And of course that's not a bad thing, they're wonderful tools, those fine points. But I'm always trying to avoid getting into too small detail, trying to avoid getting really fiddly with my detail. And I just find that I get quite fiddly and detailed when I work with more pencil than with soft pastel. I certainly think that my style is a little bit tighter these days, just from experimenting on Pastelmat a little more. So I better work on some more of the face. As I said, I could spend ages on ears. It's difficult to know when you're done with those. So let's move on down the face a little bit and start building up some of the texture in the top of the forehead so that I can get onto these lovely eyes. So I'm just going to start bringing in some of the lighter colours. We've got a lot of the groundwork done on this part of the face, with the texture already starting to build up. So now I'm just going to start to lay in some of the shadow colours on this side of the face. Start picking out more texture in the coat. And this is my lovely grey 8 from the animal set. One of my favourite colours to use. And you'll often find it in the shadows of my paintings. So I'm really trying to exaggerate the shadow colours on this side of the face. I'm going to come in with those lovely warm browns and oranges as well, but I also want to make it very clear that we're on the cool side of the face. Hence choosing this lovely blue violet. But he's also got a lot of warm flecks through his hair, even in the shadows. So I definitely don't want to lose that warmth from his coat. And then as we come around into where more sunlight will be, just add some flecks of lighter brown earth here. So I'm really just looking at each patch of fur and trying to see what different colours I can spot dotted about. With this type of tabby cat, it's particularly difficult. You've got the tiger stripes, but then in between those stripes aren't just plain colour either, they're dappled with lots of different colours. So yeah, this type of coat really one of the most challenging, I think. So before coming in straight away with lighter brown earths and highlight colours, just dappling a little bit of this warmth. You can see around a lot of the black areas, the stripes, there are little punches of warm colour just radiating out from those black areas. And I'm also adding another little layer of colour here, which will smooth into the paper and make my next layers even nicer when I add them on. Remember, you need to have a couple of layers of pastel pigment on the paper before it really starts to move around and work for you. So don't worry if those early layers don't look very good. Try to take several layers to build up the overall effect. And then I'm in with my soft pastels, using little shards and pieces. Just keep turning the pastel pieces around in your fingers, searching for little edges. It does take a little while, and I'm sometimes clumsy with them too. But the important thing for me is getting that lovely rich pigment onto the paper. I can worry about how it looks or tweak it into place a bit better later on. But it's really just about getting the right values, the right colours on the paper. And then one thing that also helps is to, on these lower layers, slightly rub your marks in the direction of the fur, so you can help the shape of your marks even when you're blending them into the paper with your fingertip. Almost like you're stroking the cat quite vigorously there. But yeah, you can really move your marks when you have them on the paper. So don't be too worried if you're a bit clumsy with the bigger sticks, that you don't get your marks in exactly the right place each time. Pastel moves around when it's on the paper, so you've still got time to move it into place. So I'm just looking at where this little ridge of highlight comes up from the top of the eye here. And how those marks then sweep around, mixing into the layer above. So complicated, cats' faces. You really do need to take your time and study what you're seeing. So many different directions of fur, different textures. Definitely one of the trickiest things for me, I find, cats in general. And this may actually be my first proper go at a nice tiger striped tabby cat. I've painted a good few cats, but not as many as dogs. So kind of using this layer to map out where the stripes should be. Again, allowing some highlight colours to come in, not being too heavy handed at this stage, really just using my lighter colour here to map out those little gaps in between the stripes. And he's got really lovely markings on his forehead here. I'm just trying to pay some attention to that now, making my little dots get smaller as they come down onto the nose area. If you're working on a bigger scale than me, you'll be able to put more detail into those tiny little hairs on the nose. But on this scale is really only so detailed I'll be able to go on the nose. Again, just trying to angle the soft pastel to get smaller and smaller marks. And especially in these lower layers, I'm always giving everything a good bit of a rub into the paper because I want to soften these lower layers. I want to make it look really soft. I can afford to leave some of my last layers a little bit more defined. But usually in the early parts of a pastel matte painting, I'll still be doing quite a lot of blending and rubbing in so that everything ends up looking nice and fur-like and soft. So I'll pay particular attention to the area just above the eye when I'm working on the eyes themselves. Those parts are important. A lot of the character of the animal, a bit like humans, we've got a lot of character in our eyebrows in particular, a lot of expression. But really just working on this shadow side of the face for the time being. Start to bring in some colour down around the side of the face now. And you can see that there's less black in his face the further down the face you go. So he's got quite a lot of darkness at the top, and those darker stripes, but then it turns a lot more creamy and lovely rich brown colours further down his face. And I really like how the light is just catching under this eye. So the other eye over here totally in light, but then we've just got a little area here catching the light too. Just bringing some of the colour, some of the sunlight over from the other side of the face. So I'm trying to make such small marks on this part of the face. Such short fur here. Closer you are around the eyes and the nose area, the smaller those marks need to be. So just doing a little bit of work down the left side of the face here, because it means I can lean my hand over on this side of the face. Get a little bit of work done over here. So just starting to mark in some of the areas with some highlight colour on this side of the face. And of course all my marks still look a bit jagged and a bit rough, but I will come back through all of this with more colours and some pastel pencil. But as I progress, hopefully what we should see start to happen in the areas where I've got quite a few layers of these small marks, we should start to see that fur look thicker and more believable. But don't forget, from time to time when you start to lose the the depth and the definition in your marks, just come back in with maybe some black pastel pencil like me here. You can redefine those dark areas. And all that you're really doing here is adding yet another layer. So I'll come back in with more highlight colors. And that's really how you make it look convincingly thick, because you really will have applied quite a few layers on each part of the face. So there's really no faking this with just the first couple of layers. You've really got to persevere with this type of fur. So again, more areas where I'm just re-strengthening the darkest parts. You will find that when you come in with the lighter colours that you tend to lose a bit of definition. But just keep going, keep building up the layers. And such a contrast between the colours I'm using over on this side of the face and on this side of the face. Really just trying to capture the light effect. So I can start to get a little bit of the colour around this side of the face now too. And then once I've got the eyes sort of surrounded a little bit, or at least the groundwork done, then I will make a start on the eyes, because it's so easy to let time slip away in this style of portrait. Just spending lots of time on one area, so I'll try and keep it moving. See if we can get the most of this portrait done within just a few hours. So as I said, a lot less black on this side of the face, much more brown tones. And also on the side of the face we can actually see some of the fleshy colours that are surrounding his eyes. Just in at the corner here. And we've even got some really vibrant colours going on just to the top of his eye here, so I'll drop a little bit of that vibrance in now. And it sort of comes around the rim of his eye here too. So just the light behaving much differently on this side of the face, and that's what I'm trying to pay attention to. So I think the most difficult part of this is just all the little subtle changes of direction in the fur. It just seems to spread out of everywhere and go in every direction. Yet there's such order and uniformity to it as well. And one thing that's going to help you a lot in all of your paintings is, while you're progressing, make sure that you stop and get some distance from your piece. Have a look at it from a distance. I have a mirror hanging behind me in my studio. That's how I like to check things. But even for colours and things like that, just to see if you're on the right track tonally. So yeah, always take lots of breaks and get a little bit of distance from your work. So now just trying to bring in some of this lightest yellowy tint. Start finding some of the brighter areas on the side of the face. So again, big contrast between the shadow side and the sunlit side.